Americans like to imagine Canada as a polite little apartment above their empire, quiet, harmless, and grateful for the privilege of living upstairs.
Ask a Trump voter and they'll tell you Canada only exists because of them, that our economy rides on their coattails, our safety depends on their military, and our healthcare is some socialist fantasy that they're too free to afford.
You'll hear it all. That we're America's hat, a welfare state, a frozen outpost living off American generosity, the freeloader up north.
So today, we're setting the record straight. What Americans get wrong about Canada and why most of it says more about them than us.
Let's start with the favorite talking point, universal health care. Americans think it's a horror story, endless waits, bankrupt governments, and doctors trapped in socialist purgatory.
Here's the truth. It's taxpayer-funded, single-payer, and it works. Canadians live on average 5 years longer than Americans. Infant mortality's lower, and medical bankruptcy, well, it basically doesn't exist here, yet in the United States, it's a major driver of personal bankruptcy.
Now, we do have wait times for elective procedures, sure, but nobody dies because they can't afford a hospital visit. That's not socialism. That's basic care that every G20 country offers its citizens except the United States.
And if it is a medical emergency or life-threatening, you're not waiting. You're seen right away. When I had an infection after a surgery, I was admitted the same day I went in. I got a room, an IV, antibiotics, and was put on a list for the next available operating space. The only people ahead of me were already booked surgeries or real emergency. You know, car crashes, gunshots, the stuff that should come first.
It's not perfect, but it's fair. The system sorts by need, not by credit score. And it pays off. Longer life expectancy, safer streets, fewer gun deaths. Our homicide rate's roughly a third of theirs. That's not coincidence, it's policy meeting priorities.
We've chosen to build safety nets instead of cages. The U.S. still builds prisons faster than schools, and a lot of those prisons are privately run for profit. The more people they lock up, the more money they make.
Incarceration as a business model. In Canada, that idea is unthinkable. Our correctional system isn't perfect, but it's public. The goal is rehabilitation, not shareholder returns.
When you turn punishment into profit, you stop fixing the problem and start feeding it. That's why the U.S. imprisons 5 to 6 times more people per capita than Canada.
And that's the real difference between our systems. We don't treat poverty and addiction like crimes. We treat them like conditions that you can actually solve.
Here, fewer people are behind bars and more behind desks. That's what investing in education and social programs does. It gives people options before the cuffs ever come out.
And those desks matter. Canada's the most educated country on earth. More than half of adults have post-secondary education. Now, Americans love to call us the little brother, but little brother actually finished his homework.
Canadians consistently report high life satisfaction, and Canada ranks among the top countries globally for happiness, including the happiest in the G7 in 2025.
Maybe it's the universal health care, maybe it's fewer bullets, or maybe it's because no one here has to start a GoFundMe for chemotherapy. Happiness is a national resource here. We treat it like oil, something to protect and refine. And yet, they call us dependent. Our system costs less per person and covers everyone. Their system costs more, covers fewer, and still manages to bankrupt families. It's the only free market that charges a ransom for survival.
Americans love to say they're number one. But if you compare actual quality of life numbers, life expectancy, education, crime rates, healthcare access, I'm sorry, but Canada quietly keeps winning the categories that actually matter.
And we manage it without calling ourselves exceptional every 10 seconds. Although, we are doing that right now.
Hey, that's our job on YouTube. We're saying the things that other Canadians are too polite to admit.
And that's the difference. Americans confuse volume for virtue.
Canadians, we just let the math do the talking.
Whenever Americans want to flex, they point to wealth. We're the richest country in the world.
Yeah, that is technically true. but only if you measure what's in the vaults of the top 1%. The rest of America, they're still waiting for their turn at the dream.
In Canada, we don't have quite as many billionaires, but we also don't have as many people working 2 jobs just to afford insulin.
Canadian wealth is steadier. People live comfortably, not constantly on the edge. We've built systems that keep people from falling all the way down, and we have programs that help them when they do.
It's not charity, it's smart economics. When you keep citizens healthy, housed, and educated, they actually contribute more.
And you can see it in the data. Our middle class is stronger, and income mobility, meaning the chance to move up in life, is higher in Canada than the USA.
Down south, the word social sends people into a panic. Social safety nets, social housing, social programs. They hear social and think marks. Here, social just means society, as in, we all live in one.
And it shows. Canadians don't have to be millionaires to live well. A teacher can buy a house in a small town. A nurse can raise a family. You know what? That's not utopia. That's proper planning.
Yeah. Statistics Canada data shows the median wage for secondary school teachers is around $78,000. Salary grids in provinces like Ontario and BC show top-end salaries for experienced teachers with extra qualifications climbing well over $100,000 in 2024.
The median wage for a registered nurse in Canada is around $80,000. With seniority, overtime, and night and weekend premiums, it's very common for full-time hospital-based RNs to earn over $100K a year.
Here, those careers are respected. You can build a life on them, not just survive. They're not living in mansions, but they're living comfortably. 2 of my nieces are teachers and my sister-in-law is a nurse, and they all have pretty sweet houses that they own. Here, you don't have to work yourself into the ground to have a middle-class life. That's the whole point.
And somehow, life feels more balanced. People can take vacations, they can retire, and we can still afford groceries.
Americans love to call us soft for that, but I'll take soft over bankrupt any day.
Real wealth isn't about how much gold you hoard. It's about how many people get to live decently.
And that's the real difference between our systems. We don't treat poverty and addiction like crimes. We treat them like conditions that you can actually solve.
Which is why Canadians don't panic when they see a social program. They've seen what it does. It keeps people stable, productive, and off the edge.
And it pays off, not just at home, but globally.
Yeah, globally, we're not America's hat. We're the invite that actually gets accepted. Publications like CN Travel and Forbes consistently rank Canada as one of the top 10 countries to visit.
Peace and stability matter to investors and families. Canada ranks way higher for peacefulness and sits top tier for rule of law. That's why companies place teams here. The United States, it's ranked 132nd.
And since everybody asks about business, the EIU has Canada at number 2 in the G20 for doing business through 2029. How's that for the deadbeat upstairs, Donald?
When Americans talk about freedom, they mean the right to own a gun. When Canadians talk about freedom, we mean the right to see a doctor without going broke.
And that's really the difference. For us, freedom isn't noise, it's stability. It's not worrying about losing your house if you get sick. It's not fearing your kid's school could be the next headline.
And that quiet sense of safety adds up. Canadians aren't happier because we're wealthier. We're happier because the floor isn't constantly falling out from underneath us. That doesn't mean we're perfect. We've got housing issues, inflation, and plenty of political nonsense as well. But there's a baseline of trust in our institutions, our communities, and each other. There's power in that understatement, right? Happiness isn't just about smiles, it's about calm. And Canada feels calm.
That's why people want to live here, study here, and raise their kids here. Not because people love our cold winters. Nobody moves here for the joy of scraping ice off a windshield in April. But they do come for what works.
Safety, education, healthcare, and a little peace and quiet.
Canada didn't just accept multiculturalism, we legislated it. It's literally national policy. You can walk down a Toronto street and hear 10 languages before breakfast and no one's threatened by it.
That's strength, not sameness, but cooperation. It's what happens when diversity isn't a slogan, it's the operating system.
It's also why our politics don't feel like a cage match. They argue, sure, but they still believe in government as a tool, not as a threat.
Democracy's supposed to be noisy, not violent. Debate is healthy, division isn't. Canada still gets that balance right most of the time.
There's this persistent myth that Canada lives off US handouts, that we're basically a dependent state that couldn't survive without them.
Yeah, like they're the sugar daddy of the North American economy. Reality check. Canada's not living off of America. America's living off Canada's exports.
It's true, we're the largest trading partner for more than 30 US states. That's not China or Mexico, it's Canada. When an American builds a car, drives over a bridge, or turns on a light, there's a good chance something Canadian made it possible.
Energy, lumber, aluminum, fertilizer, vehicles, critical minerals. That deadbeat upstairs is literally powering their grid, feeding their farms, and building their infrastructure with Canadian power.
And it's not out of charity, it's out of contracts. Fair trade. Even during Trump's tariff war, Canadian exports held steady because the US can't afford to cut us off.
That's the part the MAGA crowd doesn't get. Their economy isn't a fortress, it's a web, and we're woven through every single strand.
They call us soft, but when Trump tried his little pay up or else tariff stunt, Canadians organized and fought back with their wallets. We talk about all of that in yesterday's video, and you can check out the links below for more.
Every time Washington lectures us about freeloading, they forget that their country literally depends on Canadian supply chains. Energy, steel, grain, rare earth minerals, even fresh water.
If Canada shut the taps, figuratively or literally, the US economy would stall within weeks. And deep down, they know it. And that's why they get so defensive.
Yep, projection's a hell of a coping mechanism, isn't it? Listen, we're not anti-American. We just refuse to play the sidekick anymore.
Because the truth is, Canada isn't just surviving above America, we're quietly thriving in spite of it.
And maybe that's what really drives Americans crazy. We built a country next door that works, quietly, consistently, without needing a parade every week to prove it.
We figured out how to live together without needing to erase each other first.
We chose peace over conquest, healthcare over hero worship, and neighbors over enemies. And it turns out that's a solid business plan for a country.
Canada's biggest revolution wasn't deciding we don't need one. We just kept improving what we already had, slowly, stubbornly, and without all the fireworks.
And that's Canada. Calm on the surface, smart underneath, and absolutely allergic to authoritarian drama.
So if anyone asks what Americans get wrong about Canada, tell them this. We like you, but we don't want to be you. We want to be us.
And we're doing just fine.
Hey, if you made it this far, you're officially part of the A-Team. We're building a community of Canadians and honorary ones who care about facts, democracy, and a little national pride.
So hit that subscribe button, give this a like, and share this episode with a friend who still thinks we ride moose to work.
And if you want to go deeper, check out our Substack, Unfiltered North. It's where we post bonus stories, behind-the-scene notes, and our weekly rants that YouTube's algorithm would rather we didn't publish.
We've also got merch, mugs, hoodies, and a new Keep Calm and Carney On collection for anyone who believes competence is patriotic.
And for our members, thank you for keeping this show independent. You make it possible for us to say what others won't. So thanks for watching, and together we're keeping Canada loud and democracy proud.
Stay curious, stay sharp, and remember, politeness isn't a weakness, it's a strategy.
See you next time, A-Team.
Ciao for now.